All right, everyone. Welcome to our November SEAHO Professional Development Hour, and we are presenting this hour today in conjunction with our SEAHO Corporate Partners Committee. So thank you, friends, for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Dan to get us started.
Yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Dan Ryan Foley, and I co-chair the Publication and Education Subcommittee with the Corporate Partners Committee, and I'll let Kenzel introduce himself briefly as well.
Morning. Good morning. My name is Kenzel Hill. I happen to be the chair of the Corporate Partners Committee for this upcoming 2026 SEAHO. And so I just wanted to welcome everyone and thank you.
Yeah, so we are doing kind of a repeat of last year where we kind of took over the SEAHO Development Hour in the one time in the fall, and we have some of our corporate partners here today to do a panel, basically talking about the concept of leaving the higher ed sector and moving into the corporate sector. And so we know a lot of our corporate partners at SEAHO have done this. And so we just wanted to create an opportunity for y'all to engage with some of our partners in a smaller setting and not such a hectic space as the exhibit hall at SEAHO, and give a chance to ask questions about what their experience has been like. I have 10 questions here that we have prepared. Whether we will get through all 10 questions, I don't know. We'll kind of let this flow organically. I'm going to ask the first couple of questions just to get us started and kind of set the tone. But then whether or not we fall back on my questions will be up to y'all. You're certainly welcome to jump in and ask whatever kind of questions that you have. Otherwise, if it's real quiet, I will continue to ask the questions that we have prepared. So to get us started, why don't we go ahead and have each of our panelists introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about where you work and how you got there. And I guess I'll just go in the order: Angela, Jolissa, Andrea, and Denise, just because that's the order I see you in on my screen.
Okay, I'll take it away. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Angela. I'm with the Brill Company. We do furniture for university housing and universities across the country. And I had an interesting take of how I got to furniture. Many of you may know me, or if you don't know me, prior to joining Brill, I was with a company called OCM. That's a topic for another webinar or another meeting. But I was with OCM for 24 years, and life takes a turn. And it also happened during COVID. So imagine when and OCM, I was sales and PR and marketing and events. And so I really thought when I was no longer at OCM, I was going to go into events. Well, when COVID hit, events were tanking quicker than anything else. So it really took a major turn. And this is where I'll talk about something like important to do is networking. Luckily, my networking skills, I received a call from a Kuho saying that the Brill company was looking for that I'd be interested. And I kind of was like, oh, furniture? I don't think I can do furniture. And so I took a chance, did some interviews. Long story short, I've been with Brill for now 5 years, and it's been a great opportunity. And there's more kind of stuff in between all that and talking about, I was I felt like I was moving into a more male dominated role. And so that brought on its challenges, which I think is one of the questions later on. So, but it's been a great move and I'm happy to be here and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jalissa. So I am with Off-Campus Partners. We're a part of apartments.com. So I started in higher ed. I went to grad school for higher ed and was very involved in undergrad. Worked as a hall coordinator at Eastern Kentucky University for a few years. So I was in that space. That's actually my background is one of the residence halls that I helped open. So that was very fun. So I changed my background to that quick. But I was in Res Life for like 6 years, I think. And then I met off-campus partners at NASPA when it was in Baltimore in 2022 in the exhibit hall. And we, just started talking and sounded like a good fit. So I kind of was able to transition over. I'm sure I'll be able to go into that a little bit more a little bit later. But Yeah, my role at Off Campus Partners is really partnership development. So I work with a lot of our current partners to make sure that we're really growing what we're offering. We do off-campus housing support, so building out off-campus housing websites and helping with housing fairs and things like that to really support the off-campus students. So it's been a really nice, complement to the work that I was doing in on-campus life. So I do a lot now with our partners to make sure that we're really like growing what we're doing, making sure we're really supporting everywhere we can.
Awesome. Good morning, y'all. My name is Andrea Becker. I'm a senior associate with Brailsford and Dunleavy, and so we're an advisory firm that helps with the planning, development, and management of places that shape community. So we work in higher ed, K-12, municipalities. We also work with some venues, so like stadiums and sports complex, and then also where all of that intersects. So we have a really wide portfolio. I am in the higher education side. My background prior to joining B&D, I spent about a little over 15 years in housing and res life. My plan had always been to be an executive director, move up to a, VPSA one day, kind of that traditional, what I thought was my pathway. And soon after COVID, it felt really solidified in that plan. I made it through. I wasn't leaving. I was excited with the work and the challenges. The role that I'd played at most of my campuses often evolved a bit to be the Swiss Army knife on the team. If there was a problem to solve or something to think about, I was usually pulled into that room pretty quickly. And always just thought that was why I wanted to be an executive director. I liked looking at all the parts from our operations to student success to academic success, staff planning, and kind of where all those things intersected. And lo and behold, I got a call from an old colleague, so similar to Angela, those networks matter, who had said, "Hey, we're looking at growing how we're thinking about enrollment management through the built environment." And so specifically looking at how are institutions connecting FYE and SYE programs from an enrollment side, from an academic success side, and then from a facility side. And I was doing that work at my last institution. And so I thought she was calling to pitch me work and wanted to have B&D get in the door, and quickly took the call. And she's like, "I never thought you would leave." And I very quickly realized that was not the call I thought I was taking. So similarly kind of took the leap to see what that opportunity could hold at a stage in my career where I have a family that we love where we live and didn't want to uproot to move up in that hierarchy. And so took the leap very nervously, I'll admit. I wasn't sure what heading out to the corporate sector would look like, but have truly enjoyed my time at B&D. I think the best parts that I got to do at every campus I'd been at, I now get to do with lots of campuses. So excited to be with you all today and to talk about what that opportunity could look like. Take us home, Denise.
My cursor can catch up with my fingers. Gosh, I couldn't have put it any better. The best parts of what I did in my career, I get to do now. That's great. I'm gonna steal that. So I'm Denise Golden. I was in housing for 25 years, the last 10 years, definitely, and all the way up there in campus leadership, and overseeing dining and all camps and conferences, auxiliary, all that good stuff that goes along with housing. In fact, Alyssa and I share a little stomping grounds in Texas, so we've seen each other a lot this fall conference series. But thank you for having me here. I did some time at UNC Charlotte, Texas A&M Commerce, and then my last stop was at Gannon University. And I guess we're answering the second question as well. Just a little bit about, that background and how I ended up here. So as a director at Gannon University, I was asked by my first supervisor, Alan Blattner from UNC Charlotte, to advise on the building of a software. And I thought, wow, we're presenting, we're writing articles, we're contributing in so many ways to the field. What a great opportunity to continue to contribute in that way in an area that I was starting to see that there was a need for contributions from housing folks like us. So did that, and then like Angela said, life happens and you have a pivot point, and went ahead and took the opportunity to focus on my kids and my home and my family. And it just was a good thing. I still talk at panels at these regional conferences and tell people how important it is, the things that we're doing physically on our campuses. So it's not always the grass is greener. It's just, is it the right fit for you at the time? So I'm sure we'll get more into that as we answer these questions. But yeah, backgrounds in higher ed, housing, and now I'm in housing software. I don't think there was anyone after me. So
Nope, I
Dan,
don't
or
think so. Yeah, if you haven't already talked about kind of your background in higher education, how you ended up there, if you could share a little bit about that as well.
Well, I'll go because I didn't mention that. I was one of those classic story of, oh, would you like to be an RA for life? I don't know if that story's still out there, but that's what it used to be when you were tapped in to go into the field. And I loved it. And I was a grad. I went to Emporia State University in Kansas, and I did both my grad and undergrad there. And then I went on to be a hall director at it was Southwest Missouri State. Now it's Missouri State University. And I loved it. I loved it. And but what I didn't love or was not my strength was conduct. And I was moved into one of the biggest buildings on campus. And it was like the incident reports, like here's the building that's calm and nice. And then my building was this high of incident reports. And everybody kept saying, because what I got was you're too nice, and like you smile after you tell someone that they're being stupid, or like being crazy. And it was not in me to be that disciplinarian. So I saw the opportunity at OCM, and that was a good fit because it was working with student leaders, working with NACUR. I was on the board when I was a student on the NACUR level, and or on the regional level, and just felt like the great fit for me. And I was there for 24 years and stayed connected throughout that, as you all know, through conferences and all that good stuff.
I'm going to go ahead, since Angela, you kind of touched on this already, um, and drop the third question in the chat because I think it ties right in. I'm dropping the questions in the chat just so that people can follow along if people come late, anything like that. But the third question is, why did you decide to make the shift from either working in housing, student affairs, higher ed in general, to working in the private sector? And so I think that ties right in really well.
So real quick for me, I wasn't seeing a clear path of where to go next. And I originally was close to my family. Springfield was only about 3 hours from my family. And originally I was like, I'll just go wherever. And then I ended up going to New Jersey, which was a huge shock. But for me, it was about the opportunity of the position that I saw that just seemed like such a good fit for me. So that's why I made the decision to go out because one of the questions about like, what do you miss? I miss it. I miss housing. I miss residence life. But my career path where I've been has been great.
I can go. So yeah, kind of starting about how I ended up in higher ed to start. So it's kind of a long story, so I'll be as brief as possible. But essentially, when I first got to college, I thought I was gonna have the best time ever, and I had a really hard first year. I didn't even like living on campus at all. I actually couldn't wait to like move off. But then I ended up randomly going to grad school for higher ed because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So somebody directed me that way, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. And then all the way through grad school, when people would ask what I wanted to do, I would say that I wanted to do anything except for housing. Like I did not want to be in housing. I didn't really like my experience. It was hard to like connect, all that good stuff, like normal first year stuff. But towards kind of the end of that second year, when we're trying to get ready to job search, one of my cohort members had signed up to go to the Oshkosh Placement Exchange. And so if everybody knows what that is, similar to TPE. And our cohort was very small. So she was wondering if somebody wanted to take her, registration over. And I was like, no, not really. But then I got convinced to go because I'm like, okay, whatever, sign me up. I'll get some good interview practice. But then when I was there, I was like surprised how much I really enjoyed the conversations. And um, Eastern Kentucky University kept inviting me back, and I was really confused. I was like, I've never been to Kentucky, whatever. So it just all happened. I was like, I didn't ever think I was going to end up in housing. And then when I was going through that process, I was like, I really like this. And then got offered the job, and I went for it, and I loved every minute of it. Being a hall coordinator, was like the best time ever, and I was able to really help students, you know, navigate that time that I struggled with. So it was, meant a lot to me to be able to do that work. So it just kind of happened and I loved it and I would never trade it. And then after, so that was at Eastern Kentucky University. And then I went to Texas A&M Commerce and then UT Dallas. And I think as I started moving up, that's when I started trying to figure out like what I really wanted to do because I found myself like the higher I got, um, I was further removed from the students, which was a little bit, it was less fulfilling when I wasn't really doing the work on the ground as much. So I just kind of started wondering like, oh, what are the other options? What's out there? So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but kind of, like housing happened, off-campus partners kind of happened. I met them at NASPA and I was like, wow, what you all do sounds really cool and very in line with what I'm kind of looking for as well. So I asked a lot of questions and it just kind of happened. So I feel like everything's just been right time, kind of right place kind of thing. And it just felt like the right move. So
Awesome. I can jump in. I think I skipped over some of my background initially. So, always in SEAHO. I started my career at Emory actually before I got my master's. So, was a hall director fellow for them. And so I worked in a role that was first year housing and student activities at the SAC, which comes full circle because that was one of B&D's first projects, was working at Emory in their rec services. And so I left to get my master's from Emory, did my master's at Florida State. Unlike Jalissa, knew I always wanted to be in housing. And so I exclusively interviewed for housing gigs across the Southeast. Moved from Florida State. This is where I joke every year that one of my brackets will win. Hopefully this March will be better for me. Florida State to Duke to NC State to UNC Chapel Hill. Really loved the triangle, bopped around a bit between res life and student leadership and housing. And ultimately found my way at Virginia Commonwealth University. Gavin Roark was moving up and realized he needed to split his team to someone to focus on kind of crisis response and staff and someone to focus on academic initiatives and co-curricular. And so moved into that role, was there for almost a decade, which is wild to think about. And again, as I shared earlier, got the call about this job opportunity, not knowing it was a job opportunity when the call came. And ultimately, it was a really difficult decision for me. I had been on that executive director trajectory. I had been a housing lifer. That had always been my identity and really baked into who I was. And now I have learned it still is who I am. It's just at a different space and different level. But had a lot of conversations with mentors around what does it look like to take this leap? Can I get back to housing if it's not right? But ultimately, the thing that I had found often left me wanting more in each job that I had was I would come in as the fixer for something or to start a new initiative or to rethink how we're operating something on campus. And then once we fixed it, I was ready for the next thing. I was ready to think about what are we fixing next or where are we going? And knowing that that's not always the cycle that we need. Sometimes we do need to rest and be okay with the thing that we already have that's not broken. And so I realized early that to move up and move on and to find that excitement that I got every time that I kind of pushed to the next thing, B&D has been a great fit for that. I get to think about problems holistically. I get to elevate beyond just the one department and think about what does it mean for the institution? What does it mean for its students, its stakeholders? I've told a couple of folks that I feel like every time it's a little bit of a mini dissertation of looking at qualitative data and quantitative data and coming up with what's the best outcome and the problem of practice to solve. And so it's really been an exciting transition. But ultimately for me, that initial jump was not something I was looking for and something that I was a little nervous about because I knew housing and I knew higher ed. I didn't know what corporate life would look like. And so I'm excited to share that I've been super excited to stay here and the work that we're doing. But I do think it helped that it was really intentional and aligned to the things that I liked within my role. And I know Denise mentioned that earlier as well, that alignment.
Exactly. So I guess I'll go next because I feel like we are kindred spirits in some way. So let's see. I swiped out and came back in, so I had to have Dan send me the list again. I didn't mean to. But yeah, it wasn't a decision for me. I think I alluded to that. I also signed an NDA and received a really big severance package. So I can't speak about it, but I think that all alludes to the fact that there was nothing wrong with my career path, and there was nothing wrong with the amazing success we were having on my campus, simply just leadership decisions. So sometimes you are given the forethought to be able to say, I'm going to make a conscious decision. That's what these panels are good for. Some of you out there are probably considering that. And so you'll walk away with some nuggets that can help you with that decision. Sometimes it's your network that taps you. And like Andrea said, kind of gives you that opportunity, and you have to contemplate it. And sometimes you don't get the choice, but you still go through the identity crisis and the contemplation. Where am I going to put my skill set? And so even though it wasn't an active decision for me, thankfully I had a phenomenal network. And a part of what drove my decision in the end to go ahead and join Housing Cloud, I'd been an advisor. It doesn't mean I had to go work for them. I was looking at higher education coordinating board things that I could use my doctorate in, policy writing, legislation, and none of it sounded exciting to me. And so back to one of the responses I gave earlier, just where can I feel like I'm still doing the work, but through a different path? So if I can't be on this path anymore, then how can I continue to provide people with retention tools and making sure that they have what they need to serve their students? So, if you're looking ahead and thinking, I just want to be ready in case I get tapped or in case a decision happens that's out of my control, it's good to go ahead and do that self-reflection as to what would be your why would you leave, why would you stay, what would get you to come back? Because I, of course, was thinking the same thing, Andrea. How can I make sure that I'm still relevant so that if I want to go back, I can, and in what role would that be? And in what role, logistically, geographically, those types of things. So if you're bound to a certain place, those things would help contribute to that decision. If you're not, of course, that gives it a totally different spin. So I think that question was, why did I decide? Yeah. I wanted to stay relevant. I wanted to stay in touch with my network. So in addition to providing a service that I would have wanted as a housing person, I definitely wanted to keep feelers, ears to the ground, and stay relevant, stay on top of best practices and research and articles and what's everybody talking about, so that if I decide to go back physically to a campus, I can. If I decide to go back into some other higher ed supportive way, I can. So, but so far, I'm really loving it. So for now, the grass is greener for me. But yeah, I'll go ahead and mute myself. I feel I'm getting a little bit of a head cold, so I can't even tell if I'm whispering or yelling. So someone just messaged me if that was really loud or really quiet. So next one.
You're totally fine. So we do have several other questions, but I do want to open it up for anyone to ask any questions of their own. Otherwise, if people are not feeling chatty, I will continue with questions. I am watching for if you use the React and you can raise your hand virtually, because I know several people do not have their camera on, and I learned that I can program it to chime if someone raises their hand. So if you would like to take advantage of that, please feel free at any time. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead with our next question, which is to tell us what kind of, or did you experience / what were some of the challenges you faced making that shift from a college university setting to the corporate setting?
I'll start since I last stopped. Identity crisis, big time. Had no idea that was going to occur for me in my late 40s. So housing and being on campus was a huge part of my identity. So just staying in touch with my friends and having them be a listening ear as I cried through, just getting through that identity crisis. So that, and then the learning curve of whatever system you're going to use in order to go out there and try to find contacts and stay in touch with them, and finding your own approach to, if you're in some type of role like a bunch of us are, where you make calls and you have meetings and you're in sales in some form or fashion. And that's not what we're used to doing in such an overt way. So we stand at orientation and we sell our school on people, but not the same. So and doing so with your friends. So basically, if any of you have ever been promoted and you're supervising your friends or the people who were your peers, and then all of a sudden you're supervising them, it's similar on the other foot. Like, now I'm going to be asking my friends to buy something that I'm selling. So just finding a good balance and staying true to yourself. And in the end, I found that that ended up really working well for me. So not being a traditional salesperson is actually what is endearing and causes sales to be good for me. So anyway, I'll go ahead and hand off the baton.
I'll follow. We'll snake. We'll go the reverse order. So I think for me, some of the biggest challenges, honestly, was the uptick in travel and housing. Obviously, I went for like conferences at a couple points in year to now traveling pretty regularly. Some once a week, sometimes twice a week to different campuses. So from a family dynamic, that was definitely an adjustment that I had not expected. Um, Admittedly, I also had looked at folks who'd left the field and thought, wow, that's got to be a better schedule. And it's 9 to 5, it's corporate. Y'all, I could not have been more wrong. I think leaving Res Life, I didn't think that the pace could change. It is a faster pace than I was used to. We're working with multiple projects consistently, multiple clients consistently. And so really keeping track of that. I realized looking back, the last couple roles that I had a couple different areas in my portfolio, which that was helpful because I had to track different things with different needs at once. But that uptick and swing in what that means, what a deliverable looks like for a client, shifting to think about, I've got to be able to prop it up in a way that they can implement the recommendations that we're giving them. So a lot of my work focuses on operational assessment and how to improve an operation. And so really being able to be critical of what can the campus or that specific unit or leadership team actually accomplish versus what do they need to do long term, and really thinking strategically about that every time and making recommendations, but knowing how quickly things move and change, and thinking about even just against the cadence of res life and housing. You have those really peak seasons. I'm looking at you, August, right? Of July and August of crazy busy. And then you have a little bit of a downhill. And then you get another big peak with conduct and crisis and I hate my roommate time. And so you know what those peaks and valleys look like. And the corporate side, not so much. It's just constantly busy. And then I think the challenge is because our clients are higher ed, everyone thinks they have good windows at the same time. And so oftentimes we do feel that crunch when you felt like you were releasing some space. So I think that was one of the initial just really big challenges was shifting my mindset of, something that looked like it was quieter or more evenly paced, and realizing that that's not true. And then there's just different pressures and desire to deliver, and what that looks like. Again, I think the other reality coming from res life and housing so much, particularly in the last kind of 5 to 10 years of my career, between COVID and just shifting enrollment patterns, was a reactive space, and then transitioning back into that planning strategic advisory space, and thinking about kind of how that cycle looks and feels differently, and how can I understand what that reactive space looks like for a client and still deliver something that's going to help them proactively plan. So I think they've been good challenges, but they were definitely unexpected of just the clip and the pace, and how hard the work is. I definitely assumed grass was greener, and it's way easier. Grass is greener because it's an aligned fit, and I'm really excited with the work that I do. But some of those challenges I had not expected.
I can go. Um, so I think I definitely echoed Denise when she was talking about identity. So just thinking about making the transition, I was really worried about making the right choice. All I knew was higher ed. So just being comfortable with the idea of like, okay, like if I do make the transition, like what does it look like? It was really important for me that whatever I do is the right fit. So if I was going to make the transition, I wanted to know exactly what it was going to be like, which is impossible. But I asked a lot of questions even before I even applied with the team. I like connected with them and asked all the questions about like what is like the corporate life like? Like how do you all manage this? What does this look like? Because I also was very spoiled when I was at EKU. We had amazing leadership, and I have very high expectations for the teams that I work on. So I did ask a lot of questions to make sure that whatever I was going to do was still going to be very much in line with what felt good for me. I need to be very invested in my work and make sure that it like feels good like what I'm doing, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing, I was still very much involved with students. So, there's a lot of different factors that go into it when you're transitioning from being like right there on campus in higher ed to something very unknown. So I did ask a lot of questions, and then luckily, like throughout the transition, or when I actually accepted the job and started, like my team is amazing and they made it very easy. For a long time, I was like, corporate what? Like it still feels very much like higher ed because of the team. Most of the people on my team did come from higher ed. So although we are a part of like a very large company like apartments.com, our parent company, CoStar Group, like they're massive, but our off-campus partners team is um, pretty small. And most of our team, again, has that like student housing experience. So for me, although I'm still corporate, not like higher ed, but it still feels very higher ed, which is really nice for me. So asking a lot of the questions and really making sure that I knew what I was getting into was important. And then again, luckily for me, my role involves a lot of travel to conferences and campus visits and making sure like I still get to be very involved at a lot of different campuses and go to a lot of the different conferences that I always enjoyed going to. So that's been really fun as well. And when I'm there, I usually stay the whole conference and still like participate in the sessions and all of that. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But I know one of the questions later is like advice and everything, but I would say anybody that is looking to make the transition from higher ed to something else is just asking the questions and making sure that you don't just go anywhere. Like it was very important for me to make sure that like if I did transition out, it was gonna be the right fit.
There we go. So for me, I really didn't struggle. I struggled with a move to New Jersey from the Midwest. That was probably the biggest struggle in terms of my first big move. But I struggled more so on my second move when I moved from OCM to to the furniture world. And part of that was I was not working with students as much, and so that was a big challenge. But the cool thing is and because I'm a little bit older, um, I saw an opportunity like, the people that I knew were starting to look at retirement. Well, how are we educating and teaching the next level of professionals to understand furniture? Because on my world, when I first, I'm like, it's furniture. How hard can it be? There's a lot to know in the furniture world, believe it or not. And so making that transition, I said, how can we do that? And so the company has supported kind of my passion of that and like working with younger students, and we work with Rely and really I just try to introduce younger students when they're coming into the booth about like you might not be a buyer now, but you're going to be a buyer potentially in the future, and just educating them about taking advantage of that vendor experience and being a part of the exhibit hall and not minimizing what your role is on campus at that time. So I've appreciated that opportunity. And then I really struggled also with because through OCM I was at most of the conferences, so I never felt like I really left Res Life per se. And so I was like, when Bill, my boss at the time, he said, if you travel more than 3 weekends a year, I'll be surprised. And I'm like, I was used to traveling like 18 weekends a year. And I'm like, what am I going to do with my time? And I really struggled with that. But then I realized, oh, I can go to the movies when my friends go to the movies, or I can go to a play during the week, or, just different things that I realized that I had missed out on, not in a bad way, but just didn't know that that was out there. I have a long-term relationship now, those kind of cool things that I don't know had I stayed on the same path where I was, that might not have happened. So it's all been very good. And also the whole piece of the um, being in a male dominated, what I perceived was male dominated. And I think there's probably more time to talk about that as well. But that was also a little bit of a struggle at first. But I feel like I found my footing and I'm doing, I'm keeping up. So
Thank you all. I do have a question from the audience. I'm going to drop it in the chat. But the question is, what aspects of your past role drained your energy, and what patterns do you want to avoid repeating? I think this is a great question.
energy.
Um, I'll reframe it. I don't know about drain, but and maybe I'll get to something that drained. If y'all know me, I'm a super positive person. So um, uh, I'm realizing things that took a lot of time that brought me joy. I enjoyed supervising and developing staff members and teams and setting the vision. And now that I am not supervising anyone, so I miss some of those developmental pieces, but drain or just use of time, however you want to see it. I'm not doing any of that. And some people ask, how did you transition to working from home? Oh my goodness, I get so much done. And I don't know if it's necessarily because I'm at home. I think it's because I'm not supervising. So I am a part of a startup housing software company. So yes, it's all boots on the ground, and that's the exciting thing, that we did in Res Life. Everyone here, I'm moving mattresses and cleaning toilets if I have to. So I'm getting to do some of those things, obviously with different looks and feels. So I don't know if it was a drain, but it's definitely it was a use of time that is now being repurposed. And what I can't, I'll have to redirect to the chat where the question was, but was the other part of the question the opposite, right? What was it, Dan? I can't
What
see that.
patterns do you want to avoid repeating? If there was something particularly draining about your work in higher ed, is there anything you
Mhm.
want to avoid?
I think that's just happening out of schedule and scope now. It's naturally happening for me. But I want to embrace, so on the opposite side of that, not taking this gift of a different work-life balance, blend, schedule, whatever you want to call it, and embracing it. So I will be an empty nester as of July and am going to take full advantage of being remote. I can spend a week, I can move my daughter. She's moving to Nashville, whoever said Nashville, move her there and spend a whole week with her. I can, so I'll hit you up, Angela. I can move my son to the Coast Guard and maybe just spend a week in Cape May, New Jersey if I want. And I can see all of my son's fall games and spring games because I can. So maybe just embracing some of that and not taking it for granted, because I think maybe that's, some of those things we might do when those of us that have been in our career for so long in similar roles, you might not see the forest for the trees. So that's the takeaway I'm having from that.
I think one of the things, and I don't know if I'm going to say this the right way, but I was thinking a lot about I'm learning and still in some cases it's business, and I think I take everything very personally. And my boss has really been good to, he goes, this is business. He goes, at some point, like if we're bidding on a project or something and I put everything into it and then we don't get it, I just feel so defeated. My boss said, at some point, it's out of your control. It's the decision is going to be made, and it's not anything that you did right or wrong. It's just it's business. And I think learning that has taken some time. I don't know if it's something I want to avoid repeating, but it was just that I think learning things about yourself along the way, like how do you balance roles where maybe I was so invested in students and that kind of thing, and now it's a process, and sometimes you win and sometimes you don't, and learning to be able to handle that in a positive way.
I think similarly, one of the kind of areas that took more energy on my end previously was that reactive nature. I really liked having a plan of what we were going to do that week, that day, that year. And so when something arose, and I'm a pretty big empath, and so pouring a lot into whatever that situation was, whether it was a staff member or a student situation. And so just realizing that I would leave everything on the court, and it was really tiring at the end of the day. I think in my current role, the way that that's become a superpower is I get that. And so being able to understand when, a client needs to reschedule a meeting or something's going on, that we need to look at that context in a unique way. And that what's hitting campuses, specifically res life and housing, it's not the master plan. That's the thing that's going to set them apart. It's how their staff care for their students. And so really being able to figure out what that looks like and how do we support that operationally. I think similarly to Angela, in the ways that I show up, always excited when you see something go well. And I think in housing and res life, you often get to see things go well. You get to see that final outcome. You get to see whatever that long-term nugget is that you planted, you get to see it grow. And a lot of times in this role, you leave before you get to see the output happen. You're in to kind of set the future goal, or you're there for the shovels in the ground to see a building start, but then we're gone before it comes to fruition. And so I think that's been an area that requires just a lot of thought about what does it mean to be a bit disassociated from that, but also pour all into the front. And so again, I think that that's just been an area of growth in a similar way as Angela described, of separating kind of that full self from corporate. And so how do you find that balance and pour all of yourself into the best parts of the planning process, and then be okay with, what comes out afterwards, and learning how to kind of shift and be a bit removed in that way. But that is an area that, admittedly, and I know later the question is like, what do you miss, or would you ever go back kind of deal? But I think that's the part that I miss the most, is seeing that full cycle, seeing that student walk across the stage that you dealt with first year that really struggled, or seeing that staff member get the next job. And so I think some of those kind of full circle moments are the things that I miss the most.
Okay. Let's see. It's just a little tricky, but I would say, in terms of draining, like not a lot drains my energy, I would say. I'm an extrovert, so being around a lot of people, like, in res life, there's always people around. So I was usually pretty energized, but I do feel like kind of what I mentioned earlier when I started moving up and I was an assistant director of res life versus a hall coordinator. So I was a little bit more removed from the students. Not having as much student interaction was a little bit more draining, I guess. I didn't fill my bucket as much. That's when I kind of started wondering, like, oh, is this really for me? And looking back, I'm like, I wish I would have found more ways as an assistant director to like get in the halls more and interact more and kind of like put myself in the position where I did have a little bit more of that. So I guess thinking about that and now my current role, the first couple years I was at Off-Campus Partners, I was like a university account manager. So working very directly with our university partners, visiting campus all the time, attending events, really having a lot of that. Day-to-day interaction. And then last summer, I was moved into a role that is a little bit more strategic in terms of working across the board with our partners, new universities, things like that. So kind of similar situation. I was a little bit nervous about, okay, well, am I going to like it as much if I'm not as hands-on with the people that I'm working with every day? But I've definitely made it a point to make sure that I'm doing all the things that really do like fill my bucket and make me, I mean, my role does a little bit of everything, so it's easy to do that. But like just thinking about like as I continue to move up in my career, like how can I make sure that I'm still staying engaged with the students, the people that I'm working with every day? Because that really is what I like doing the most. So not just moving up and like, oh, well, I guess I don't have any interaction and then I don't like it as much. So trying to make that intentional effort to stay as engaged as possible.
Perfect. We are starting to run low on time. So I am gonna look at these questions real quick. I think real quick, what kind of guidance or advice would you have for those who are considering making the leap from higher ed to the corporate sector? And some people have a concern about stability and variability that the private sector has. So what would you say to that?
I think if you're in a toxic situation, then you have to do whatever you have to do, no matter what your nest egg looks like or family support. If you have to move back in with family in order to get out of a situation or to take that leap to try being in this space, which can be unpredictable, but it feels like now, sad to say, it feels like it's no less predictable than higher ed. So maybe taking some courses or introspective journaling or whatever you need to do in order to figure out if something's irking you. Why is it irking you? Is it your environment, or is it that you're not in the right role anymore? Could you find similar things at other schools? So it's not necessarily jumping into a different industry, but maybe just changing the environment a little bit. But I think if you have to, you have to. But if you have the option to save and feel like you have a backup plan so that as everything gets really expensive, you don't, put yourself further into debt beyond your student loans just to be able to make what you think, is your next step happen. So just be careful, but get advice beyond these panels. Definitely have individual conversations and be thinking about what an actual physical move somewhere in order to make your dreams happen. Yeah. I guess I'll add for Jalissa's point, anyone who's there who's just starting to feel like they aren't getting that interaction, if you have an empty staff apartment somewhere or an empty apartment on campus, offer to take duty for your staff and stay on campus overnight and make breakfast for the RAs that want to pop by the next morning. And, there's so many ways I'd be happy to brainstorm with people after, but even as a, almost 50-year-old director, I was on call on my campus just a few years ago. So there are ways to get that involvement and hopefully to identify that there's a need for you before. I think Jalissa has, expressed that she's like, man, if I had just done a little bit of inventory or introspective, maybe I could have made that happen. But now you're holding true to that and making sure that in your future, you're always thinking of those things.
Yeah, and I can add too. And I think I kind of mentioned it earlier too, but just asking a lot of questions. Again, like I'm very happy with where I ended up, but if I wouldn't have asked a lot of questions and I would have just accepted something just to get a new job, like I feel like I probably would have been very unhappy. So I think the right fit is very important, especially in corporate, because it is very different. So making sure that you really are like passionate about like the work you're doing, like what you're doing every day, the team that you're on, like what the actual environment's like. I actually still go into the office every day unless I'm traveling, so I would not like to work remote, and I know that because I need to be around people. So there's just like a lot of questions I think that it's really important to consider when you're trying to make a move so that it is kind of the right fit. Because I know one of my coworkers like left last year and he's like, oh, I hate all of these things. And then he came back. So, it's good. It's like you got to make sure that you're really making a good decision. And shameless plug, we are actually hiring for a few positions right now. So that anybody that actually is looking to transition, let me know because we have quite a few new roles popping up. So.
Real quick, I got two good pieces of advice early on in my career. And one was I was in the exhibit hall, and I just thought when I was younger and I was a hall director, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so glamorous. They're traveling all over the place and all that kind of stuff. There is some not glamorous parts of travel. We can talk about that on another time. But the one thing that was said to me is like, the company can teach you the base, the information and the things that the company does and what their product does or all that kind of thing. But the mind of a housing person. You've lived it. We joked about the July, August. You don't call on customers, like smart partners know when is the best time to connect and those kind of things. So that is a great skill that is transitional. And when you look at the exhibit hall, look at all the different companies. I mean, it takes so many companies to make universities work and be a part of that. And so wanting to see that be a success, there's so many different avenues you could look at the exhibit hall as to what there's sales, there's marketing, there's, benefits where you can still work with students or you can work in facilities. There's so many levels that there's those opportunities there. And then I'm kind of taking the flip side of what Denise said, because unfortunately for me, you're young and just I wish someone would have taught me this or talked to me more about this in terms of the financial piece of things. Like I left money on the table. I left 6 months shy of being vested at a university, and it wasn't a toxic thing. It was just I left, and being young, you don't think about retirement. And I'm at the point where that's what I think about most is like, I'm ready to retire in a good way. But just knowing that. And then also in the corporate world, there is room for negotiation more so than in higher ed. And so utilizing that, and I have a friend that's in HR in totally different industry, not in higher ed. And she'll always say, you can ask for that. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want or I need to be remote 2 days a week. Ask for it. You never know. You don't know until you try. So that would be my two pieces of advice as you're thinking about what do I want to do next.
I think my advice on this one would be intentional. And I think all three of the other panelists answered this in this way as well. But really making sure you're not running away from something you don't like, but run towards something you want. And so I think that even just reframing, I know I've had a lot of folks reach out over the last year, like, how did you get out? Or how did you shift? And I think if that's the mentality, you're not going to land someone where you're going to be successful. There's so much transition and change that it's just going to be different things you're upset about or unsatisfied with. And so I think really being intentional in what are you running towards? What do you want? And once you know what those things are, they may be in housing, they may be in student affairs, it may be in academia, but outside of, the co-curricular world, maybe it is corporate. But I really think understanding what are those skills, what are the things that give you energy and drain your energy, where do you enjoy spending, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday and I want 2 more hours on this thing. What are those things for you? And run towards opportunities that have that. Because I think it's really easy in the busy or the draining to think about something else is just better. But at the end of the day, a job's a job's a job. And so if you love what you do and you find alignment, it's fantastic. But if you just simply pick something to run away from something else, I fear you're going to be let down. And so I think that intentionality of finding the alignment would be my advice.
Thank you all. Before I move into what will probably be our last question that we have time for, does anyone in the room have any questions for our panelists? Feel free to raise your hand or drop in the chat. Raekwon?
Yes. So greetings. My name is Raekwon Lunkin. I am currently a residence coordinator at Florida State, but I'm in my 4th year. Um, my question is, with all your experiences that you've been, I feel like all y'all got different experiences. Do you feel like there's a particular experience that you have at your institution or working in housing? I feel like everybody done pretty much the same thing, whether it's event planning, conduct, serving as chair for certain committees, volunteering, things along those lines. That prepared you, let me finish that actually. That prepared you for your current role today.
I'm going to go with networking. I think networking is so crucial, whether it's at, the staff level, entry level staff up to director. Network and see who knows people. There, it's true that it's not what you know, it's who you know. There is definitely some what you know things involved, obviously, but I think networking and I was thinking this too for like, like Jalissa said, we sometimes find out people are leaving housing before other people do, just because of the nature of our business. Or if we're talking with someone, there's like, oh yeah, they're going to retire next year. But we kind of get little tidbits of that. And so networking and knowing people will get you in places that you didn't think. And that's how I got my job with Brill, is just Brill saw me being involved at the conferences with my old job. And I made sure that I got to be friends with the vendors because we saw the vendors more than we were being at home. And so you develop relationships with your vendor partners. And so just that getting to know as many people as you can at different levels in their careers, and that will definitely pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And then I would say for me too, because I know I mentioned like when I was at EKU, like our leadership was amazing. And one of the things that they really allowed us to do was get involved in a lot of different areas. So I think just volunteering for a lot of things, being on a lot of different committees, like I was involved with like staff selection, and this is in my Texas roles too, but like staff selection, training, like all the different types of committees. I mean, there's a lot more, but I feel like having like all the different experiences, doing all the different things, very much prepared me to do anything, which Res Life kind of does in general, but you also have to make sure you're seeking out those additional opportunities and taking advantage of everything that's there. I will argue to anybody that Res Life people are going to be the best hires that you can, because they do so many different things and you have to really navigate crisis and program planning and like all that stuff. So I think just taking advantage of all those things and really being like well-rounded is important, because then you're really going to be able to do pretty much anything.
I think I'll chime in and say this answers Raekwon's question, but also one of the other ones that Dan had prompted us with, which is just how to interact on the exhibit hall floor, no matter what level you're at, entry level, mid. But there's competencies, and they're a really good framework for so many conversations, not just in your own developmental path with your supervisor and mentors, but also on the exhibit floor. But all of those things are going to come in handy because you can walk up. I intentionally ask people, what is your role on your campus so that I can speak to how this might be useful to you. But you could, if you make a list of 5 corporate partners that you haven't met, you have no idea about their services. It doesn't matter if you sign contracts. We love talking about it, and ask them from that perspective. I'm entry level now. What should I know about your company and your service? When I'm mid-level, what should I know? Or if I change my roles to facilities or occupancy management or something else, what should I know? And that's not only going to give you a bunch of information, sometimes better than you could get sitting in a session, unfortunately, but a ton of information, but also you're going to be remembered. And so you're building those connections that maybe if you do decide to switch to the dark side in a few years, now you've made connections with people because they're going to remember that you asked really important questions. So that's it.
I would agree. I think networking is a critical skill. I would say both on the corporate partner floor, but then also at your campus and within the profession and within SEAHO. I think that's one of the no surprise, as I say, my love for SEAHO is strong. But I think the network and the family and the relationships that you can develop there continue. And so I think just taking the time to invest, networking not from a shake a hand and walk away space, but really trying to connect and find that space, I think is really important. I think Raekwon, in your question around like what were some of the experiences on campus. Honestly, for me, one of the things that I didn't expect that I would rely on so heavily now was committee work. But being able to see how different areas across campus are striving to get towards the same outcome and how you're balancing those pieces. It's never something that lands well on a resume, I'm sure, in terms of like, I was on all these million committees. But that the way of engaging your thought process of how do different stakeholders need to maneuver and connect together in a ways to advance a university mission. Obviously, that might be a little bit B&D specific in terms of thinking for me, but really a lot of the lessons learned about networking, the politics involved, and how do you find the why and the connection point. And so I think for me, it would be the general skill of networking, and then the experiential piece would be all those university-wide committees.
Okay, folks, it is 10:30. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I am going to end our questions at this time. I know that I would love to continue to ask questions and continue this conversation. I did drop in the chat. If anyone does have any lingering questions, all of our panelists have dropped their emails in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to them directly with any lingering questions, or you can feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to get you connected with people. Or if there's other partners that you might have questions for, we can help you with that as well. Same as if anyone has just any questions about the Corporate Partner Committee or just wants to learn more about that, feel free to get in touch with me. With that, I will turn it back over to Liz if you have anything.
No, thank you all for coming this morning. And this recording will be available for anyone who was not here on our SEAHO YouTube channel. Have a great weekend, everyone, and have a great holiday week next week if you celebrate. Bye, everyone.